How's everybody doing? So I really wanted to start this season out making this video, and especially while the topic's still somewhat fresh. But I'm having a hard time, honestly, because I need to walk a really fine line in this video between addressing and correcting some things and not sounding too insulting. I want to talk about the collapse of DEFY Media. I want to talk about the situation involving the content creators, this money that they're owed. I'll talk about that in a second. And especially the videos that MatPat from Game Theory has made about it. But I don't want to come off like I'm insulting him. It's very clear to see if you watch those videos that the guy is like near tears, and I get it. You have a young baby, you have a family to take care of, you were unfairly taken advantage of, but I think your anger is misplaced at who took advantage of you. And unfortunately, I think that the expectations for recompense are wildly beyond the realms of reality. Furthermore, I think that while this is an unfair system and it needs to be fixed, the way that you're going about it, or the way that he's going about it, I should say, is not the most effective way. And furthermore, it's somewhat selfish. But, again, I understand that. And in his situation, with the knowledge that he has available to him, I would probably respond the same way that he has. He's doing the only thing that he knows how to do to try and right a wrong. But I just want to address some things. I want to clarify the reality of the situation for people who don't understand how these things work. And more importantly, I want to give a message to people in both the shoes of somebody like MatPat, who has been screwed over by an MCN like DEFY Media, and also to people who want to be content creators online one day and might find themselves in a similar situation. Because I think the important thing here is to use this as a teaching moment. So first things first, for anybody who somehow has missed this story, I think I want to start at the beginning. I'm just going to give you a really quick catch-up to get to where we are right now. DEFY Media was an MCN, a multi-channel network that operated in the YouTube sphere. They owned Smosh. They were the MCN for Game Theory, which is kind of the relevant thing that you need to know for this video. Now, DEFY Media collapsed, and because of the way that the payment system for YouTube content creators using an MCN works, which is a pass-through for the money, where the payment that would normally go from YouTube to the content creator instead goes from YouTube to the MCN, who takes their percentage and then pays the content creator. When DEFY Media collapsed, they owed payments to Game Theory and other content creators as well. And because DEFY Media is now having their assets liquidated, those content creators are not receiving the money that is owed to them. And unfortunately, it's unlikely that they ever will. That's the first thing I want to make clear. There's a 0.0% chance that they'll ever get the entirety of the money. There is some chance that they will get some payment of the money. So the next thing I want to explain is kind of how this stuff works and why these content creators are not going to get the money. And I understand that the sentiment that MatPat is trying to put out in his videos is that was our money that was supposed to or should have gone to us, and instead, because of the pass-through system, DEFY Media had that money, and so in the liquidation, we should get our money, and then they should liquidate DEFY Media's assets. Unfortunately, that's not the way things work in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of, the regulations that govern this type of thing. See, these content creators were under contract with DeFi Media, and essentially, the way that the system is set up, those payments go to DeFi Media, who then, according to the contract, pay out the content creators. So when DeFi Media's assets are liquidated, what happens is a third party comes in and basically finds and catalogs any positive assets that the company has, any money that they have left over in the bank accounts, any assets that can be liquidated. They liquidate them, and then they come up with whatever money DeFi Media is still worth. Anybody who's ever gone through a personal bankruptcy, it's a very similar system to how that works. Then the next thing that happens, or simultaneously really, a full catalog is created of everybody who holds a debt over DeFi Media, who DeFi Media owes money to. Now here's the thing. That is the status that these content creators actually hold. DeFi Media is not, in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the financial system, in the eyes of the financial institutions, DeFi Media is not holding on to money that belongs to these content creators. They simply owe these content creators money. That's how the system works. So all of these people who DeFi Media owes a debt to are cataloged, and, an overall amount is created for how much DeFi owes and who they owe it to. And then that is, put against the assets of DeFi Media. Now, there are certain high priority things that get paid out in full before anybody else gets a penny, such as certain court-ordered payments and money owed to the government and things like that. Those debts get paid off in full before anybody else gets a penny. Now, if anything is left, which is a big if in this situation, because DeFi Media was a company in collapse. They probably don't have that many assets. They probably don't have bank accounts flush full of money. That is split up against the overall debt. And let's just say the overall debt is only the $1.7 million supposedly owed to these content creators. And DeFi Media turns out has assets in the neighborhood of $170,000, or 10% of that. Everybody will get back 10 cents on the dollar of what they were owed by DeFi Media. If there are other debts, which apparently there are, to at least a loan to Ally Bank, and anybody else that may hold a debt to them, that can significantly lower that percentage to where maybe the total debt is really $3.4 million, including the $1.7 million owed to content creators, in which case still everybody would get, in this case, 5%, and they would end up getting 5 cents on the dollar of what they were owed. Now, it might seem like a really unfair system if you're one of those content creators, but consider that it could be much worse. The similar process of liquidation was used in the repayment of the money stolen by Bernie Madoff. And at the end of the day, those people who were literally robbed by this man, for lack of a better term, this was literally found to be criminal action on behalf of Bernie Madoff. Those people got back something like, it's been 4 years since I did the research on this, but it's something like 20 cents on the dollar for what they were owed by Bernie Madoff. And that would be a really, really good figure, probably best case scenario for the content creators in this DeFi Media situation, because DeFi Media is not going to have nearly the amount of assets to go towards repaying these debts that Bernie Madoff did, because, as I said earlier, DeFi Media was a company in collapse. Now, where I really did start to take issue with some of the stuff that MatPat said, and again, I'm not trying to be too critical of him. I understand he's emotional. I understand why he's emotional, and again, I would probably be the same way in his position. But when he starts to talk about banking, he says a couple of things that really bother me. First off, he said, I never understood or thought about how banks make money until this whole situation came about. Now, I just want you to stick a pin in that, and we're going to come back to it in a second. But the other thing that he said was when he was addressing the tweets made by Ally Bank, basically saying, Ally basically tweeted out, we sympathize with you guys, we know you're losing money here, we're losing money here too. MatPat got really angry with that. He called it a false equivalency. He said that this is the bank trying to say that them losing money is equivalent to content creators losing money, and I think he totally missed the point of what the bank was actually telling him there. So when Maria gave me the first cut of this video and I was watching it back, I didn't like this particular part. I didn't feel that what I said was said clearly enough, so I want to try and rephrase it here to make a little bit more sense. I feel that the message that Ally Bank was trying to get across in those tweets was not really intended to be construed as a plea for sympathy from the masses. I think that's kind of a little bit of projection on the part of MatPat. I think that's him perceiving a bank to operate in the same way that a YouTube channel or, being a social media personality does, which is not the case. I think the message that should have been taken from those tweets is more this. We sympathize with you, but this is a really bad situation. Everybody's going to lose money here. Even we are going to lose money here, and basically, if there was any way to stop us from losing money, we would be doing it. And obviously, this company does not have the money to repay all of the debts that they owe people. He then proceeds to kind of make this plea that they should get their money back because of the way that banking works and because of the way that banks make money, which is that people put money into the banks then make a profit by turning around and loaning that money out to other people and collecting an interest off of those loans, which is actually just one of many ways that banks might make money with the money that you put into them. Basically, he argues that since Ally Bank makes money with other people's money anyway, and because they have the right to refuse a loan to anybody that they want, that Ally Bank shouldn't expect to be allowed to get their money back, and that everybody else should take priority first. Here's the problem. First off, it's not like Ally Bank, or any other bank for that matter, is really putting your money at risk to that degree, because there's something called the FDIC. And yes, while Ally Bank and other banks do use the money of people who deposit into them to then turn a profit on loans, at least where the depositors are concerned, those deposits are insured up to a certain amount. Usually, I think it's $100,000. So even if the bank screws up big time and collapses, your money is insured by the FDIC that is set up just for this type of thing. Furthermore, this is something that you should understand when you put money into a bank, and it's part of the agreement, and it's part of the reason why when you bank with these banks, you can make interest back on your payments. And yes, your interest is nowhere near as much as the amount that the banks profit off of their business dealings, nor should you expect it to be, because that would not be a profitable business model for banks to have. And banks offer you other services in return, such as credit and debit cards, making the ability to use your money in and out of your bank account much easier, and more importantly, security. Sometimes using a bank is a necessity for larger sums of money. More importantly, when you're talking about the bank's right to refuse giving a loan to DeFi, and the fact that the bank should just take a loss on the money because they were the one who accepted giving a loan to DeFi. When banks decide to give a loan to a company, they weigh risk versus reward. And part of that process is the understanding that even in worst case scenario, if the company were to go belly up and have to have its assets liquidated, they would recover some small percentage of their money back from that loan in the liquidation process. This is all things that are accounted for, because unlike Matthew Patrick, banks do know what it is that they're doing when they enter into these agreements. And again, I'm sorry to be critical, but I really want to make a point here, and that's where I come to the last thing that I want to say, and kind of the moral of this video. The much more important thing here, I think, is to use this, like I said earlier, as a teaching moment, not only for content creators who have already been shafted by DeFi and other MCNs like MatPat, like Game Theory, but also especially for younger people who are trying to come up into the world of being a content creator, or really doing anything that is going to require you to enter into similar financial agreements with other people. Unfortunately, these content creators were kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time, because they came into really a market that kind of emerged underneath them. This is very much an industry that is really recently created and is still having the paths to success kind of forged out by these early content creators. And so they didn't have the opportunity to learn from the mistakes of people before them, like people in a lot of other industries have. And MCNs are really a predatory thing, looking at it from the outside in, and the way that these contracts operate and the way that they do business. MCNs are entirely a predatory institution made to capitalize on the fact that you have a lot of these young people who all of a sudden have a successful property that is able to make a lot of money, such as a YouTube channel, and these MCNs are essentially people with much more business savvy who have found a way to take advantage of you and reap some profit off of your work and your success. If you don't believe me, ask anybody who has experience in any other field of business about these contracts. Show them an example of an MCN contract. Nobody would ever sign these things. The way that the pass-through payment system works is god-awful. I can't imagine a reason that anybody would ever accept an arrangement like that unless they were getting something absolutely massive in return, which is not the case with an MCN. Furthermore, there have been examples of MCNs trying to sign content creators onto, I think it was PewDiePie, who some MCN signed onto an indefinite contract with no end date, which is not even legal, which nobody with any amount of business savvy or experience whatsoever would ever sign, and which nobody with good intentions would ever try and make somebody sign. Nobody who is not trying to screw you would ever try and make you sign a contract with no end date whatsoever. So, if you are somebody who is trying to achieve success in something like YouTube or a similar field or genre, if you are somebody who suddenly finds yourself in such success, learn some lessons from this. The MCN system as it currently exists is an entirely predatory entity. I cannot think, and believe me, I tried in preparation for creating this video, I cannot think of a single advantage that an MCN provides to you that cannot be gained other ways that are much less damaging to your financial prospects going forward. B, never enter into any sort of agreement, never enter into any sort of business arrangement, and especially never sign any form of contract if you do not understand all the implications. And even if you do think that you understand all the implications, never sign a contract without first being able to take it to your own independent counsel and have them look over it for you. And I know some people are saying, but lawyers cost money. I can't afford to do that. If you're in a position where you stand to gain enough money to where you're going to be signing contracts like this, you can afford to pay out the little bit of money to have a lawyer look over a contract for you. And that amount of money is going to keep you from losing way, way more money in the future. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened to the content creators who had contracts with DeFi Media. Find any of the other horror stories about using MCNs and having contracts with MCNs from other content creators on this platform. You should never do any kind of business. You should never sign any sort of contract unless you fully understand it and you've had proper representation look over it, if at all possible. And if you ever try and take a contract away from a meeting and say, I'm going to have my attorney look over this, or I need some time to have somebody look over this, even if you can't afford an attorney, and somebody tries to stop you, somebody tries to say, no, you need to sign it now, or no, you can't take the contract with you, don't do business with those people. They're trying to screw you, because that is how business is done. That is the standard, to be able to take a contract back and have your attorney inspect it. If somebody's trying to stop you from doing that, I guarantee you they have ill intent. And that goes back to even the banking thing. MatPat said in his own videos that he didn't understand or ever even consider what a bank was doing with his money when he was depositing money into it. If you have a sizable amount of money, an amount of money that you're going to need to sustain your family going forward, and you're going to put it into a financial institution, shouldn't you understand what exactly it is that you're doing with your money? Shouldn't you understand how banks work, how credit unions work, whether or not you should use a bank or a credit union? What are the advantages and disadvantages? What are the different kinds of accounts that you can have at a bank? What are the advantages and disadvantages and risks and rewards of those? I know that when you all of a sudden find yourself with a bunch of money, these things can seem overwhelming. But the lesson that I want to give to people going forward, especially young people, is even if, things seem like they're going great, and even if you find yourself in this unexpected level of success, take your time. Understand every decision you're making. Because what happened to these content creators, at the end of the day, is the result of them making decisions that they didn't fully understand the implications of. And it's a very good example of what happens when you do that. My last message to the actual content creators is this. Again, I sympathize with you, especially MatPat and Game Theory. I know you have a new baby. I know you have a new family. And it sucks that this happened to you, and it sucks that it happened to you at this particular time. But you still have an extremely lucrative brand under your belt. And you have a ton of supporters who are there for you. I know that you do live streams. I know these people, donate to you through Super Chat and things like that. You're going to be okay. Your family's going to be okay. More importantly than trying to signal boost your pleas that at the end of the day don't mean anything, because the system works how the system works. No matter how unfair it is, no matter how unjust the situation is, that's how the law works, and it's created to be as fair as possible for as many people as possible, as often as possible. And sometimes you're the guy who gets the short straw. The more important thing, I think, is to understand that a lot of people look up to you. And the lesson that you should be striving to pass on from this is, I made a mistake. Learn from my mistake. Explain exactly how everything went down, where you made mistakes, how these people were able to take advantage of you so that they can't do the same thing to the people who look up to you and look to emulate you in the future. And most importantly, learn from your own mistake. Everybody sometimes gets taken advantage of in the world of business, whether they realize it or not, especially when they're new to it. The more important thing is that you're only an idiot if you get taken advantage of in the same way twice. So learn from this. Don't be so trusting of people. have independent representation, have them look over those contracts, especially if you have a big brand like Game Theory. I guarantee you can afford to make sure that you have a lawyer. And I guarantee you that if you do so, and if your contracts are properly looked over by good representation in the future, this type of thing will be much less likely to happen to you. Guys, that's all I have to say. Again, I hope nobody takes this as a criticism. I don't mean it that way. It's unfortunate what happened. But I just want people to be realistic, and I want people to understand how these things actually work. And I don't want young people to make the same mistakes and then think that all they need to do to right the wrong is get signal boosted and then they'll get their money back, because that's not going to work for Game Theory, and it's not going to work for you either. You need to cover your butt right from the beginning. Always, 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 and don't ever trust anybody. Even if they're good people, they're probably always going to choose to take care of themselves and their family before they take care of you and your family. So you need to be responsible for covering your own. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.